The storm arrived without warning, as if the sky itself had cracked open to release something ancient and furious. Alawen Fairfax sat beside her fire, a wool shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, watching the flames dance while rain hammered against the windows of her small cottage like fists demanding entry. The wind howled through the eaves, rattling the shutters, making the old timbers groan in protest. She should have been reading. The book lay open in her lap, pages she had traced 100 times before. But tonight, the words blurred and shifted. Tonight, something felt wrong. A pressure in the air, a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with the thunder rolling across the countryside. Briarwick Cottage sat at the edge of the village, close enough to see the church spire on clear mornings, far enough to feel utterly alone on nights like this. It had been her sanctuary for 18 months now, ever since Edmund died, and left her with nothing but this modest inheritance and a reputation as the young widow who preferred solitude to sympathy. The fire crackled and spat. A log shifted, sending sparks spiraling upward. Alawen pulled her shawl tighter and tried to focus on the page before her. The knock came at 9:30. Not a polite knock, not the tentative tap of a neighbor seeking shelter from the storm. This was violent, desperate, a sound that made Alawen's heart seize before her mind could catch up. The door shuddered in its frame, as if something were trying to break through. She rose slowly, the book tumbling forgotten to the floor. Another knock, weaker this time, followed by a sound that might have been a body slumping against wood. A groan, barely audible beneath the shriek of wind. Every instinct screamed at her to stay back, to call out without opening the door, to pretend she had not heard. Women alone did not open their doors to strangers in the dead of night. Women alone did not survive by being foolish. But something made her move forward. Something in that second knock, that weakness, that spoke not of threat, but of desperation. She lifted the heavy iron latch. The man collapsed across her threshold before she could react, his weight carrying him forward onto hands and knees, rain streaming from dark hair plastered to his face, his breathing ragged and wrong. Water pooled beneath him on her flagstones, mixing with something darker. His coat, once fine, was torn at the shoulder, and beneath it, she saw what turned her blood to ice. A wound, deep and spreading crimson across the white linen of his shirt. "Hide me," he gasped, lifting his head just enough to meet her eyes. They were gray, those eyes, pale as winter morning, and filled with something she recognized, despite never having seen it before. The look of a man who expected to die. "Please, they are coming." She heard it then, beneath the rain and thunder. Hoofbeats, distant but approaching fast. The jangle of metal, the shouts of men cutting through the storm. "Who?" she breathed. "The Royal Guard." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. His fingers were cold, trembling, but his grip was iron. "I swear to you, I have done nothing. I am innocent of what they claim, but they will not listen, and if they find me here, they will kill me. Please." The hoofbeats grew louder. She had seconds, perhaps less. Later, she would tell herself it was madness. Later, she would wonder what force had possessed her in that moment, what reckless impulse had overridden every sensible thought in her head. But in that heartbeat of decision, looking into those desperate gray eyes, Alawen Fairfax chose. "The root cellar," she said, hauling him upright with strength she did not know she possessed. "Through the kitchen, beneath the table. There is a trap door. Go now." He moved faster than a wounded man should, staggering through her cottage with one hand pressed to his bleeding side. She heard the scrape of wood, the hollow thump of the trapdoor falling closed, and then silence beneath the storm. She had just enough time to kick his blood from the flagstones toward the fire, to smooth her hair, to compose her face into something resembling irritated confusion rather than abject terror, before the pounding began anew. "Open in the name of the crown!" Elowen counted to 3, arranging her shawl with deliberate calm, then opened the door with an expression of startled annoyance. 4 soldiers stood in her garden, rain streaming from their scarlet uniforms, their horses stamping behind them. The man at the front was tall, hard-faced, with the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Captain Aldous Wren," he said, not asking permission before pushing past her into the cottage. "We are searching for a fugitive, a man, tall, dark-haired, possibly injured. Have you seen him? At this hour, in this storm?" Elowen wrapped her shawl tighter, letting indignation sharpen her voice. "I have seen nothing but my own fire, Captain. I am a widow alone. I do not make a habit of entertaining visitors past sunset." The captain's eyes swept her cottage, taking in the modest furnishings, the single chair by the fire, the book splayed open on the floor. His gaze lingered on her face, searching for cracks in her composure. "You would do well to tell the truth, madam. The man we seek is dangerous, a traitor to the crown. He attempted to murder Lord Aldrich Blackmere, advisor to His Majesty himself." Elowen's pulse raced, but she kept her expression steady. "How dreadful. But I assure you, Captain, no one has come to my door this evening. I would hardly hide a murderer in my root cellar." The words nearly choked her. She watched the captain's eyes flick toward the kitchen, and for one terrible moment, she was certain he would demand to search it, certain he would find the trap door, certain she had just signed her own death warrant for a stranger whose name she did not even know. But the captain merely grunted, gesturing to his men. "Search the grounds, the outbuildings." He turned back to Elowen, something cold in his expression. "If you are lying, madam, know that harboring a traitor carries the same penalty as treason itself. You would hang beside him." "Then it is fortunate," Elowen said quietly, "that I have nothing to hide." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he swept out into the rain, his men following like shadows. She stood in the doorway, watching them search her small stable, her garden shed, the hedgerows that bordered her property. The rain soaked through her shawl, but she did not move. Only when the last hoofbeats faded into the storm did she close the door and lean against it, her legs threatening to give way. What had she done? She made herself walk to the kitchen, made herself kneel beside the table, her hands shaking so violently she could barely grip the iron ring of the trapdoor, made herself lift it and peer into the darkness below. "They are gone," she whispered. For a moment, nothing. Then movement, a groan of pain, and the stranger emerged from the shadows, one arm wrapped around his ribs, his face gray beneath the blood and rain. In the lamplight of her kitchen, she saw him clearly for the first time. He was perhaps 30, with sharp aristocratic features and a jaw that suggested stubbornness even in extremity. His clothes, though ruined, spoke of wealth. Real wealth, the kind that bought tailors and valets and estates she could not imagine. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "You saved my life. I may have condemned my own." She gestured sharply toward a chair. "Sit before you collapse. You are bleeding on my floor." He sat, though whether from obedience or necessity she could not tell. As she gathered clean cloths and water, heating her small kettle over the fire, she tried to steady her racing thoughts. A traitor. She had hidden a man accused of attempting to murder a lord close to the crown. If the captain returned, if anyone discovered what she had done. "What is your name?" she demanded, turning back to him with basin and cloth in hand. He met her eyes, and something shifted in his expression. A decision made, a mask lowered. "Caspian Ashford," he said quietly. Duke of Thornwood. The cloth slipped from her fingers. She knew that name. Everyone in England knew that name. The scandal had consumed the broadsheets for weeks. The Duke of Thornwood, accused of conspiracy and attempted murder, vanished from London before he could be arrested. A reward for his capture, a promise of swift justice. "You," she breathed. "You are." "I am," he agreed, something almost like dark humor flickering across his face. "And everything you have heard about me is a lie. But I suspect you will not believe that until I tell you what Lord Blackmere truly is and why he wants me dead before I can speak." Alawan stared at him, this duke in her kitchen, this fugitive whose blood stained her floor, and realized with dawning horror that her quiet life had just ended. Whatever came next, there was no going back from this. Part 2. The arrangement. Word count, 1,350. Alawan retrieved the fallen cloth and knelt beside the chair where the Duke of Thornwood sat bleeding in her kitchen, forcing her hands to stop trembling through sheer will. "Remove your coat," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And your shirt. I need to see the wound." He complied without argument, which told her more about his condition than any words could. The coat came away in rags, the shirt beneath soaked through with blood and rainwater. Beneath it, his torso was lean and muscled, the body of a man who rode and fenced and did not spend his days idle. The wound was a gash across his ribs, long but not deep. A blade, not a bullet. Someone had tried to kill him at close range and nearly succeeded. "This needs stitching," she murmured, examining the ragged edges. "I have needle and thread, but it will hurt. I have endured worse tonight." His jaw tightened as she pressed the cloth to the wound. "Though I confess, this is the most unusual surgery I have experienced. Most physicians do not work in their night dresses." Despite everything, a startled laugh escaped her. "Most patients do not arrive accused of treason." Alleged treason. His winter-pale eyes held hers. "I told you. I am innocent." "So you claim." Alawan rose to gather her sewing kit, the small bottle of brandy she kept for medicinal purposes, the candles she would need for better light. "But forgive me, Your Grace, if I do not simply accept the word of a stranger who collapsed on my doorstep with the royal guard at his heels." Fair enough. He accepted the brandy she offered, drinking deeply before handing it back. "What would convince you?" "The truth. All of it. Starting with why Lord Blackmere wants you dead, badly enough to frame you for his own murder attempt." The Duke studied her face, and she had the uncomfortable sensation of being weighed and measured, assessed for trustworthiness by a man who trusted no one. "Sit down, Mrs. Fairfax," he said finally. "This will take some time." She did not ask how he knew her name. The cottage bore her late husband's mark everywhere, from the brass plate on the door to the embroidered cushions she had not been able to bring herself to discard. A duke would notice such things. She sat across from him, needle and thread ready, and began to stitch while he spoke. "Lord Aldrich Blackmere is not merely an advisor to the crown," Caspian began, his voice low even though they were alone. "He is the architect of a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of government. For 3 years, he has been selling military intelligence to foreign agents, British troop movements, naval positions, the names of operatives abroad. Men have died because of him. Good men." The needle paused in Iloan's hand. "That is a serious accusation." "I have proof." His gaze burned with cold fury. "Documents in Blackmere's own hand, letters bearing seals that cannot be forged. I was gathering the final evidence when someone in my household betrayed me. Blackmere learned what I knew, and within hours, assassins came to my home. I barely escaped. And the accusation against you? The attempted murder? A knife planted in my study. A witness paid to lie. A warrant issued before I could speak a word in my own defense. His laugh was bitter. Blackmare is thorough. He has spent years cultivating allies, destroying enemies, building a web of influence so vast that even the truth cannot cut through it. Who would believe a fugitive duke over the trusted advisor to the crown? Alawen finished her stitching and tied off the thread, her mind racing. It was an incredible story. Too incredible, perhaps. And yet the captain had seemed so certain, so eager to find his prey. And yet the Duke had come to her door rather than surrendering to face justice. And yet, there was something in his voice when he spoke of the men who had died, a grief that seemed too raw to be performed. "Why come here?" she asked. "This village is miles from anywhere. How did you even find my cottage?" "I did not find it. I found the road that leads past it, and I followed it until my horse threw me half a mile back." He grimaced. "The beast is likely in the next county by now. When I saw the light in your window, I had no choice. It was your door or collapse in the mud and let them take me." "Fortune favors the desperate," Alawen murmured. "Fortune has nothing to do with this." His gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. "You chose to hide me. You lied to the royal guard. You are now as entangled in this as I am, and I am sorry for it, but I cannot undo what has been done." The words landed like stones in her chest. He was right. Whether his story was true or not, whether he was hero or villain, she had made her choice in that split second at the door. She had chosen him over the law, instinct over reason, and now she would live or die by that decision. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "Shelter. Just for tonight, until I can travel again. By morning I will be gone, and you can tell the captain I must have circled back through the woods. You never saw me. You know nothing. And if they return before morning, if they search the cottage properly this time, then we are both dead." He said it flatly, without drama. "But I do not think they will return. They are searching the main roads now, the routes to the coast. They expect me to run. They do not expect me to hide in a widow's cottage, stitching myself back together with borrowed thread." Alawen rose, moving to the window to peer through the rain-streaked glass. The night was black beyond the candlelight, impenetrable. "You ask me to risk everything," she said without turning around. "My life, my home, my reputation. For a man I do not know. For a cause I cannot verify. Yes. And what do I receive in return?" Quiet hung heavy between them. When she turned, he was watching her with something that might have been respect. "What do you want, Mrs. Fairfax?" The question caught her off guard. What did she want? She had stopped asking herself that question the day Edmund died, the day she had learned that wanting things was dangerous, that hope was a luxury she could not afford. But looking at this wounded Duke in her kitchen, this impossible complication that had stumbled into her careful, solitary life, Alawen felt something stir that she had thought long dead. Possibility. "I want to know if you are telling the truth," she said finally. "I want to see this evidence you claim to have. And if you are innocent, if Blackmere truly is what you say he is, then I want to help you prove it." His eyebrows rose. "You would involve yourself in this? Knowingly?" "I am already involved. You said so yourself." She crossed her arms. "If I am to hang for treason, I would prefer it to be for something I actually did, not merely for answering my door." For the first time since he had collapsed on her threshold, the Duke of Thornwood smiled. It transformed his face, cutting through the pain and exhaustion to reveal something almost human beneath the aristocratic mask. "You are not what I expected, Mrs. Fairfax." I imagine not. She gestured toward the small bedroom at the back of the cottage. You may sleep there. I will keep watch by the fire. We will make plans in the morning. He rose carefully, pressing one hand to his freshly stitched side. At the bedroom door, he paused. For what it is worth, he said quietly, I am glad it was your light I saw in the storm. Whatever happens next, I will not forget what you did tonight. The door closed behind him, and Elowen sank into her chair by the fire. She had hidden a duke. She had lied to the crown. She had offered to help a man accused of treason prove his innocence. Her quiet life was over, and somewhere, deep beneath the terror, she felt something she had not felt in 18 months. Alive. Part 3. Setting the terms. Word count, 1,100. Morning arrived gray and sullen, the storm spent, but the clouds lingering like bruises across the sky. Elowen had not slept. She had watched the fire die to embers, listened for hoofbeats that never came, and turned the Duke's story over in her mind until every angle had been examined. She still did not know if she believed him, but she knew, with absolute clarity, that she could not simply pretend last night had not happened. She was in this now, whatever this was, and half measures would not save her. She was heating water for tea when he emerged from the bedroom, moving stiffly, but with more color in his face than the night before. He had cleaned himself as best he could with the basin she had left. He looked, she thought, almost ordinary, like a man who might call upon her in the village, tip his hat, comment on the weather. Not like a hunted fugitive, not like a duke. How are your ribs? She asked without preamble. Sore, but holding. He accepted the tea she offered, wrapping both hands around the cup. You did good work. My physician would be impressed. Your physician would be horrified at the conditions. She sat across from him at the small kitchen table. I have been thinking. Dangerous occupation. About your situation, about what happens now. She met his eyes steadily. If I am to help you, I have conditions. A flicker crossed his face, surprise perhaps, or amusement. You are negotiating with me? I am protecting myself. She set down her cup. You arrived on my doorstep with nothing but a wound and a story. You ask me to risk my life on your word. That is not sufficient. And what would be sufficient? First, I want to see the evidence. The documents you claim prove Blackmere's treason. If they exist, if they are genuine, then I will believe you. If they do not, or if they prove to be fabrications, I will go to Captain Wren myself and tell him everything. The Duke's jaw tightened. The documents are not here. They are hidden in London, in a place only I know. Then you will take me to them. That is not possible. The journey to London is dangerous. I am hunted. You would be arrested on sight as my accomplice. Then find another way to prove your claims. Elowen's voice hardened. Because I will not stake my life on faith alone, your grace. He studied her for a long moment, and she saw calculation happening behind those eyes. He was reassessing her, adjusting whatever assumptions he had made about the soft-hearted widow who had saved him from the rain. Very well, he said finally. There is someone in the village, a man named Thaddeus Crane. He runs the printing shop on the high street. He is an old friend of my family, and he has copies of some of the evidence. I can direct you to him. He will confirm what I have told you. Elowen filed the name away. That is acceptable. What is my second condition? You have more than one? I have 3. She held up a finger. Second, whatever we do next, we do together. You do not send me on errands while you disappear. You do not make decisions that affect my safety without consulting me. This is a partnership, or it is nothing. Mrs. Fairfax, Elowen, she cut him off. If we are to be conspirators, we should dispense with formality. And I am serious. Your Grace, I will not be a pawn in your game." He set down his tea. "You speak as if you have experience with being discarded. I speak as a woman who has learned that men in power rarely consider the consequences their decisions have for those beneath them." Her voice remained steady, but beneath it lay 18 months of grief. "I will not let that happen again." The Duke was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. "Caspian," he said, "if we are dispensing with formality." It was a concession, small but significant. Alawan nodded. "Caspian, then. My third condition is this. When this is over, when Blackmere is exposed and your name is cleared, you will ensure that I am protected. I do not mean money, though I will not refuse it if offered. I mean assurance that no one will come for me afterward. That is more complicated. I cannot control what the crown decides. Then use your influence, your title, whatever power you still possess." Alawan leaned forward. "I know what happens to common women who become inconvenient. We disappear. I will not let that be my fate." Neither spoke, the quiet taut as wire. Then Caspian extended his hand across the table. "You have my word," he said. "All 3 conditions. I will prove my innocence to you through Thaddeus Crane. I will treat you as a partner. And when this ends, I will ensure your safety personally." Alawan looked at his hand. Elegant despite the scrapes and bruises. The hand of a duke offering alliance to a widow. She took it. His grip was warm and firm, sealing a bargain that would bind them together through whatever darkness lay ahead. And when their hands parted, something had changed between them. They were no longer stranger and savior. They were conspirators now. "Well then," Alawan said, rising from the table, "I suppose we should begin. I will go to the village this morning and speak with Mr. Crane. You will stay here, out of sight, and try not to bleed on anything else." Despite everything, Caspian smiled. "As you command, Mrs. Fairfax." "Elowen," she corrected. "Elowen," he repeated, and the sound of her name in his voice felt strange and new, like the first day of spring after a long winter. She gathered her cloak and basket and stepped out into the gray morning, leaving a duke in her kitchen and her old life behind. Part 4. Fish out of water. Word count, 1,250. The village of Aldbury Cross was a 20-minute walk from Briarwick Cottage, long enough for Elowen to rehearse a dozen explanations for her visit to the printing shop and discard them all as insufficient. She had never been a good liar. Edmund used to tease her about it, the way her cheeks flushed and her eyes darted when she tried to bend the truth even slightly. It was one of the things he claimed to love about her, that transparent honesty, though she suspected now it had simply made her easier to manage. The high street was quiet in the aftermath of the storm, shopkeepers sweeping water from their doorsteps, a cart horse plodding through puddles that reflected the gray sky. Alawan kept her head down, her basket over her arm, the picture of a widow on mundane errands. The printing shop sat between the apothecary and the chandler, its window displaying pamphlets and broadsheets. A small bell chimed as she entered, and the smell of ink and paper enveloped her. Thaddeus Crane looked up from behind his counter, spectacles perched on a nose that had clearly been broken at least once. He was perhaps 60, with silver hair pulled back in an old-fashioned queue and ink stains on his fingers. "Mrs. Fairfax," he said, recognition flickering in his eyes. "I do not believe I have had the pleasure of your custom before. Mr. Crane." She approached the counter, hyper-aware of the other customer browsing pamphlets near the window. "I was hoping you might assist me with a particular matter. A friend recommended you for specialized printing work." Something shifted in the old man's expression. The pleasant shopkeeper mask remained, but beneath it, she saw sharpness awakening. "Indeed? And which friend might that be?" Elowen lowered her voice. One who speaks highly of your discretion. One who arrived unexpectedly during last night's storm. The silence that followed was charged with danger. Crane's eyes flicked to the browsing customer, then back to her face. "Mrs. Pemberton," he called out pleasantly, "I believe I have that recipe for ink removal you requested. Let me fetch it from the back." The elderly woman looked up, delighted. "Oh, how wonderful." Crane disappeared through a door behind the counter, returning moments later with a small bottle and a folded paper. He pressed both into Mrs. Pemberton's hands, refused payment with gentle insistence, and ushered her out. The moment the door closed, his demeanor transformed. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Mrs. Fairfax." He moved to the window, flipping the sign to closed. "How is he?" "Wounded but recovering. He told me you could verify his claims." "Did he?" Crane returned to the counter, studying her. "And what exactly did he tell you?" "That Lord Blackmere is a traitor, that there is evidence proving it, that you have copies. He told you a great deal for a stranger." "I am no longer a stranger." Elowen met his gaze steadily. "I hid him from the royal guard. I stitched his wounds. I am already condemned if he is caught. So I would very much like to know if I have risked my life for truth or for lies." Crane was silent for a long moment. Then he reached beneath the counter and withdrew a leather folder, worn at the edges, sealed with plain wax. "These are copies," he said, placing it between them. "The originals are in London, hidden where Blackmere cannot reach them. But what you hold is enough to understand what we are fighting." Elowen opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in a cramped hand she did not recognize. Beside them lay documents bearing official seals, lists of names and dates and locations. But one page made her breath catch. It was a ledger entry, meticulously detailed, showing payments made to a name she recognized from the broadsheets. A French spymaster, executed 2 years ago when his network was exposed. The payments came from an account in London, an account belonging to Lord Aldrich Blackmere. "My God," she whispered. "Now you understand." Crane's voice was heavy. "Blackmere has sold English secrets to our enemies for nearly a decade. The Duke discovered it by accident, a letter misfiled among estate documents. He has spent 2 years gathering evidence, building a case that even the Crown cannot ignore. And now Blackmere knows. Now he is fighting for his life, and he will destroy anyone who threatens him." Elowen closed the folder, her mind reeling. Why has no one come forward? Because Blackmere's reach is vast. He has allies in Parliament, in the military, in the courts. Anyone who speaks against him disappears. Crane's expression darkened. The Duke tried to approach the Home Secretary 6 months ago. Within a week, the man was dead. Officially, a carriage accident. Unofficially. He did not need to finish. Elowen pressed her hands flat against the counter, steadying herself. This was bigger than she had imagined. This was conspiracy at the highest levels of power, the kind of darkness that swallowed ordinary people whole. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now, we wait. The Duke needs time to heal, time to plan. There are others who support our cause, people in positions to help when the moment is right. But that moment is not yet." Crane reached out, covering her hand with his ink-stained fingers. "You have done a brave thing, Mrs. Fairfax, braver than you know. But bravery alone will not protect you. You must be careful. Trust no one outside this circle. And whatever you do, do not let the Duke leave that cottage until we send word." "How will I know the word is genuine?" Crane smiled, the first warmth she had seen from him. "The message will mention thornwood blooming in winter. Nothing else will be safe to believe." Elowen committed the phrase to memory. Thornwood blooming in winter. A code for a duke. It would almost be poetic if it were not terrifying. She gathered the folder, tucking it beneath the cloth in her basket, and moved toward the door. But Crane's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Fairfax," she turned. "He is a good man. Whatever the broadsheets say, whatever the Crown proclaims, Caspian Ashford is perhaps the most honorable man I have ever known. He would not have come to you if he had any other choice, and he would not have told you the truth if he did not believe you worthy of it." The words settled over her like a benediction. "I hope you are right, Mr. Crane." "So do I, madam. So do I." She stepped out into the gray morning, the evidence of treason hidden in her basket beneath a loaf of bread, and walked home to a duke who was waiting to learn if she believed him. Part 5. Facing the opposition. Word count, 1,300. She returned to find the cottage quiet, the fire rebuilt, and Caspian standing by the window with the careful stillness of a man accustomed to watching for danger. He turned when she entered, his gaze scanning her face for news. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand hovered near his injured side, as if ready to flee at a moment's notice. "Well?" he asked. Alawan set her basket on the table and withdrew the leather folder. "Mr. Crane sends his regards. And these." She watched him open the folder, watched his expression shift from wariness to recognition, to something that looked almost like grief. He touched the pages gently, as if they were sacred texts rather than evidence of betrayal. "You believe me now," he said. It was not a question. "I believe that Lord Blackmere is a monster. I believe that you have been trying to stop him. Beyond that," she sat down, suddenly exhausted. "Beyond that, I am still deciding." Caspian closed the folder and set it aside. "That is fair. More than fair, given what I have asked of you." They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between them. Alawan was about to suggest food, to return to the practical matters that kept her grounded, when hoofbeats sounded on the road outside. They both froze. "The bedroom," Alawan whispered. "Now." He moved without argument, disappearing through the door just as a sharp knock echoed through the cottage. Not the violent pounding of the night before, but firm, deliberate. The knock of someone who expected to be admitted. Alawan smoothed her hair, tucked the leather folder beneath a cushion on her chair, and opened the door. The woman on her doorstep was perhaps 45, tall and severe, dressed in traveling clothes of impeccable quality. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, pulled back from a face that might have been beautiful if not for the coldness in her eyes. Behind her stood a carriage, elegant and black. "Mrs. Fairfax, I presume." The woman's voice was cultured, aristocratic. "I am Lady Isolde Vance. I believe you have something that belongs to me." Alawan's chest tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "I am afraid I do not know what you mean, Lady Vance." "Do not play games with me, child." Lady Vance stepped forward, forcing Alawan to retreat into the cottage. "I know he is here. I know what happened last night. And I know that you are far too clever to pretend ignorance when your life hangs in the balance." The door swung shut behind her, and Alawan found herself trapped in her own home with a stranger who seemed to know everything. "Who are you?" she demanded. "I am Caspian's godmother." Lady Vance moved through the cottage as if she owned it. "I have known him since he was an infant. I stood beside him when he inherited a dukedom he never wanted, and enemies he never deserved." She turned, fixing Alawan with those cold eyes. "And I am the one who has been protecting him from the shadows for the past 2 years, which is why I am extremely displeased to find him hiding here with a woman I have never vetted." The bedroom door opened. "Aunt Isolde," Caspian's voice was resigned. "I should have known you would find me. You should have come to me directly instead of stumbling about the countryside like a wounded fox. Lady Vance crossed to him. "You look terrible. I've been stabbed, shot at, and forced to sleep in a root cellar. My standards have adjusted accordingly." Clearly. Her gaze shifted to Elowen. "And this woman, how much does she know?" "Everything." Caspian moved to stand beside Elowen, a subtle positioning that felt almost protective. "She saved my life last night." She lied to Captain Wren's face. "She is an ally, Aunt, whether you approve or not." Lady Vance studied Elowen for a long, uncomfortable moment. Elowen resisted the urge to fidget. Instead, she straightened her spine and stared back. "You have spine," Lady Vance said finally. "That is something. But spine alone does not make you trustworthy. It makes you dangerous." "Then we are well matched," Elowen replied. "Because dangerous is precisely what I intend to be, if it means protecting myself and exposing the truth." Something flickered in Lady Vance's expression. Not approval exactly, but perhaps respect. "She negotiated with you," Lady Vance said to Caspian. "Didn't she? 3 conditions, all of them reasonable." "Remarkable." Lady Vance settled into the chair by the fire. "Most people simply do what you ask. The title tends to have that effect." "I am not most people," Elowen said quietly. "And titles mean nothing when soldiers are at your door and your choices are life or death." Lady Vance laughed, a sound that transformed her severe face into something almost warm. "I like her, Caspian, against my better judgment, but there it is." She gestured for them both to sit. "Now, we have much to discuss. Blackmere knows you survived the attack. He knows you fled north. He does not yet know exactly where you are, but he will. I have my own eyes within Ravenshollow, his estate. Servants who remember your father's kindness and despise Blackmere's cruelty. They will warn us if danger approaches." "What do you suggest?" Caspian asked. "I suggest we move carefully. The evidence you have gathered is incomplete. Blackmere's allies will find ways to dismiss it." Lady Vance leaned forward. "What we need is a witness, someone inside Blackmere's circle who can testify to his crimes directly." "And do you have such a person?" "I have a possibility." Her eyes glittered. "Lord Blackmere is hosting a gathering at his estate in 3 weeks, a celebration of his son's engagement. Everyone of importance will attend, and I have secured invitations." "You cannot be serious," Caspian said. "Walk into the home of the man trying to kill me." "Not you. Not yet." Lady Vance turned to Elowen. Her. A widowed cousin from the country, come to London for the season. Unremarkable, unnoticed, perfectly positioned to observe and report. Ice slid down Elowen's spine. "You want me to spy on Lord Blackmere?" "I want you to save my godson's life." Lady Vance's voice softened slightly. "You asked for protection, Mrs. Fairfax. You asked to be a partner. This is what partnership looks like. Risk shared, danger divided. Will you accept?" Elowen looked at Caspian, whose gaze held something she could not quite name. Fear for her, perhaps, or hope that she would say yes. She thought of the documents in her basket, the names of dead men, the scope of Blackmere's evil. "I will," she said, and sealed her fate. Part 6. The Slow Burn. Word. Count, 1,450. The days that followed blurred into a strange rhythm, part conspiracy, and part something else entirely. Something Elowen did not have words for yet. Lady Vance departed that first afternoon with promises to return, leaving behind instructions, money for necessities, and a warning to trust no one who came to the door uninvited. Elowen found herself oddly bereft when the elegant black carriage disappeared down the muddy road, as if a general had withdrawn and left her alone on the battlefield. But she wasn't alone. That was the problem. Caspian Ashford, Duke of Thornwood, remained in her cottage, healing slowly, filling the small rooms with a presence that felt too large for the modest walls. He tried to make himself useful, insisting on carrying firewood despite her protests, attempting to cook and producing results that made them both laugh, reading aloud from the few books she owned in a voice that made even dull agricultural treatises sound like poetry. It was the reading that undid her. 3 nights after Lady Vance's visit, Elowen sat mending a torn petticoat, while Caspian occupied her father's old chair by the fire, working through a volume of natural philosophy that Edmund had purchased and never opened. His voice had grown comfortable to her now, a low melody that filled the evening silences. The philosopher argues that all matter is composed of invisible particles, he read, too small for the eye to perceive, yet responsible for every phenomenon we observe. Heat, light, the very solidity of stone, all reducible to these infinitesimal components and their motions. "Do you believe that?" Elowen asked without looking up from her needle. "I believe the world is more complicated than we can easily comprehend." He set the book aside, watching her work. "I believe we see only surfaces, and the truth lies beneath, waiting to be uncovered." "That sounds like something a man accused of treason might say." "It sounds like something a man who has learned to question appearances might say." His voice softened. "You are remarkably calm, Elowen. Most women in your position would be terrified." "I am terrified." She tied off her thread, finally meeting his eyes. "I simply choose not to let terror rule me. Fear is useful when it sharpens the mind. It becomes dangerous only when it paralyzes." "Who taught you that?" "My father. He was a soldier before he married my mother. He used to say that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it." She smiled faintly. "He died when I was 12. Fever took him. But I remember his voice when he said those words." Caspian was quiet for a moment. "My father was not a soldier. He was a scholar, happier with books than people. But he taught me something similar. He said that a man's character is revealed not in what he does when he is comfortable, but in what he does when he is afraid." "And what did you do when you were afraid?" "I ran." The admission came out rough, edged with self-contempt. "When the assassins came, when Blackmere's trap closed around me, I ran. I fled into the night like a coward, and I ended up bleeding on a stranger's doorstep, begging for mercy." Elowen set her mending aside. "You survived. That is not cowardice. That is wisdom." "Is it?" He rose abruptly, moving to the window, his back to her. "I have spent my entire life preparing for responsibility, for leadership, for the weight of a title I never asked for. And when the moment came, I could not protect any of it. My servants are scattered or arrested. My home is seized. My name is poison. And I am hiding in a cottage, letting a widow I barely know risk her life because I was too weak to face my enemies alone." She stood and crossed to him, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders. "Look at me," she said quietly. He turned, and she saw the rawness in his eyes, the guilt and shame he had been carrying beneath that controlled exterior. "You are not weak," she said. "You are hunted by one of the most powerful men in England. You have been betrayed by someone in your own household, wounded, pursued, forced to flee for your life. And yet you are still standing. You are still fighting. You are still determined to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The cost has been borne by others. By you. I chose this." She held his gaze. "I chose to hide you. I chose to help you. Every decision I have made since you fell through my door has been my own. You did not force me into anything. That is not weakness on your part. That is trust." The air between them felt different now, charged with something beyond conspiracy, beyond the practical alliance they had forged. Caspian reached out, his hand hovering near her face, as if he wanted to touch her, but did not dare. You call me your grace when you are upset with me. I call you your grace when I need to remember who you are. And who am I? A duke, a fugitive, a man so far above my station that even standing this close feels like a violation of natural law. Her voice trembled slightly. And yet I stand here anyway, because the man I see is not a title or a scandal. He is someone who reads philosophy by my fire and burns porridge and argues with his godmother. Someone who makes me feel. She stopped, unable to finish. Feel what? He asked, barely above a whisper. Alive! The word escaped before she could catch it. You make me feel alive, and I had forgotten what that felt like. His hand completed its journey, fingers brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. Elawan. This is foolish, she whispered. Whatever this is, it cannot end well. You know that. I know that we are both afraid. I know that the world outside this cottage wants to destroy us. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. But I also know that I have not felt this way in longer than I can remember, perhaps ever. What way? Like I am exactly where I am supposed to be, like the running has stopped, just for a moment, and I can breathe. She should step back. She should remind him of the danger, the impossibility, the 100 reasons why this could only end in heartbreak. Instead, she leaned into his touch. We are both fools, she said. Then let us be fools together. He kissed her forehead, soft and reverent, as if she were something precious. It was not the passionate kiss of novels and fantasies. It was something quieter, more profound, a promise made in the space between breaths. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that this is real. This is not gratitude or desperation or the madness of proximity. This is real. I know, she whispered, and she did. The fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, full of danger and uncertainty. But inside this small cottage, in this stolen moment, there was only warmth, only possibility, only the terrifying, exhilarating truth that somehow, impossibly, she had begun to fall in love with a duke. And he, perhaps, with her. Tomorrow would bring reality crashing back. Lady Vance's plans, Black Mir's threats, the gathering that would determine all their fates. But tonight, just for tonight, Elawan allowed herself to hope. It was the most dangerous thing she had ever done. Part 7. The Proving Ground. Word count, 1,300. 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Lady Vance returned twice, each time bearing new instructions, new intelligence, new warnings. Elawan learned the names and faces of Black Mir's inner circle until she could recite them in her sleep. She practiced the deportment of a minor aristocrat, the curtsy of a country cousin, the art of seeming invisible while observing everything. Caspian healed. His wound closed cleanly, leaving only a pale scar across his ribs and a restlessness that grew more pronounced with each passing day. He paced the cottage like a caged wolf, frustrated by his enforced inactivity, terrified for Elowen in ways he tried and failed to hide. The night before her departure, they sat together by the dying fire, neither willing to be the first to speak of what lay ahead. You do not have to do this, Caspian said finally. There is still time to withdraw. Lady Vance can find another way. There is no other way. Elawan kept her voice steady. We have discussed this. Your godmother has spent weeks arranging my introduction. If I fail to appear now, questions will be asked. Everything we have built will collapse. Better collapse than lose you. The words hung between them, raw and honest. "You will not lose me." She reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. "I will attend the gathering. I will observe. I will identify whoever within Blackmere's circle might be persuaded to turn against him. And then I will return, and we will end this. Together. You make it sound simple. Nothing about this is simple." She lifted their joined hands, pressing a kiss to his knuckles. "But I have spent 18 months being safe, being careful, being so afraid of loss that I forgot how to live. I will not go back to that." Caspian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with desperate tenderness. "Promise me you will be careful. I promise. Promise me you will run if things go wrong. Do not try to be a hero. Just run. I promise." He held her for a long time, and when they finally parted, his eyes were bright with emotions he did not voice. "When you return," he said quietly, "there are things I need to say. Things I should have said before now. Then say them. Not yet. Not like this, with danger hanging over us both." He touched her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. "When you return. When this is over. When we are free." It felt like a promise. It felt like a prayer. Ellawen carried both with her when the carriage came at dawn. Blackmere's estate was called Raven's Hollow, and it lived up to its name. The house rose from manicured grounds like a dark dream, all sharp angles and towering windows that reflected the gray sky. Carriages lined the drive, disgorging guests in silks and jewels, who laughed and chattered as if this were any ordinary celebration rather than a gathering hosted by a traitor. Ellawen descended from Lady Vance's carriage, wearing a gown of muted lavender, modest enough to be unremarkable, fine enough to avoid suspicion. Her story was simple. Mrs. Helena Whitmore, widowed cousin of Lady Vance, recently emerged from mourning and eager to rejoin society. "Remember," Lady Vance murmured as they approached the entrance, "you are invisible. You observe. You do not draw attention. And you absolutely do not engage with Blackmere directly unless there is no alternative. I understand. Do you? Because one wrong word, one suspicious glance, and we lose everything, including your life." Ellawen swallowed her fear and lifted her chin. "I understand." The interior of Raven's Hollow was as oppressive as its exterior, heavy with dark wood and darker paintings, ancestors glowering from gilded frames. The gathered guests moved through the rooms like players on a stage, performing wealth and influence with practiced ease. And at the center of it all stood Lord Aldrich Blackmere. He was smaller than Ellawen had imagined, a compact man with silver hair and a smile that never reached his pale eyes. He moved through his guests with the easy confidence of a spider in its web, touching elbows, sharing whispered words, collecting debts and favors with every interaction. When his gaze passed over Ellawen, she felt a chill sweep through her. But his eyes moved on, dismissing her as unimportant, and she allowed herself to breathe. Cousin Helena, a young woman in pink silk, appeared at her elbow, all golden curls and eager smiles. "I am Beatrix Mallory. Lady Vance mentioned you would be attending. How wonderful to meet you." Ellawen recognized the name from Lady Vance's briefings. Beatrix Mallory, daughter of a baron, engaged to Lord Blackmere's son. The very engagement this gathering celebrated. And, according to Lady Vance, deeply unhappy about the match. "Miss Mallory," Ellawen curtsied, "the pleasure is mine. What a beautiful celebration. Isn't it?" Beatrix's smile flickered, something hollow beneath the brightness. "Lord Blackmere spares no expense. He's quite devoted to his son's happiness." The emphasis on his son's was subtle but unmistakable. "And your happiness," Ellawen ventured carefully. "Surely that matters as well." Beatrix's composure cracked, just for a moment. My happiness is complicated. But forgive me, I should not burden a new acquaintance with such thoughts. Come, let me introduce you to the other guests. She took Alohan's arm and swept her into the glittering crowd, and Alohan allowed herself to be led, her mind racing. Beatrix Mallory was unhappy. Beatrix Mallory was marrying into the Blackmere family against her will, and Beatrix Mallory, perhaps, might be persuaded to share secrets if approached with care. The hunt had begun. Part 8. The Moment of Truth. Word count, 1,200. The gathering stretched across 3 days, each one a delicate dance of observation and survival. Alohan watched. She listened. She catalogued every whispered conversation, every meaningful glance, every servant who moved through the shadows, with messages that never passed through proper channels. Blackmere's household was a machine of secrets, and slowly, carefully, she began to understand its workings. But it was Beatrix who provided the breakthrough. On the second evening, during a musical that seemed designed to induce sleep, the young woman appeared at Alohan's side. She carried 2 glasses of champagne and wore an expression of desperate determination. "Walk with me," she whispered. "Please. I cannot bear another moment of this pretense." They slipped through a side door onto a terrace overlooking formal gardens silvered by moonlight. The air was cool, sharp with the scent of late roses. "You are not really Lady Vance's cousin," Beatrix said without preamble. "Are you?" Alohan's stomach dropped. "I beg your pardon?" "I am not a fool, Mrs. Whitmore, or whatever your real name is." Beatrix's voice trembled, but her eyes were clear. "Lady Vance has never mentioned a cousin in all the years I have known her. And you watch Lord Blackmere the way a mouse watches a cat, waiting for him to pounce." The quiet between them stretched taut, dangerous and charged. "What do you want?" Alohan asked finally. "I want to know if you can help me." Beatrix's composure shattered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know what he is. Lord Blackmere. I know what he has done. I have seen documents in his study, letters he believes are safely hidden. I know about the payments to foreign agents, the men who have died, the treason that has been covered up for years." Alohan's breath caught. "How?" "I was looking for evidence that might break the engagement, something that would convince my father to withdraw his consent." Beatrix laughed bitterly. "I found far more than I bargained for. And now, I am trapped. If I speak, Blackmere will destroy my family. If I stay silent, I become part of his conspiracy." Alohan reached out, taking the young woman's hands. "You could testify. If there were protection, if there were people who could ensure your safety, would you be willing to speak the truth publicly?" "Against one of the most powerful men in England?" Beatrix's voice cracked. "He would kill me before I reached a courtroom." "Not if we move carefully. Not if we build a case so overwhelming that even Blackmere's allies cannot save him." Alohan squeezed her hands. "There are people working against him. Good people. People who have evidence but need a witness who can corroborate it. You could be that witness, Miss Mallory." Hope flickered in Beatrix's eyes, fragile as a candle flame. "You truly believe that is possible?" "I believe we have to try. I believe that some evils are too great to ignore, no matter the personal cost." Alohan thought of Caspian, of the scar on his ribs, of the life he had lost to Blackmere's schemes. "I believe that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it." Beatrix was silent for a long moment. Then she straightened, wiping her tears with trembling fingers. "There is a safe in Lord Blackmere's study, behind the portrait of his father. The combination is his wife's birthdate, written backward. Inside are the original documents, the ones that prove everything." She met Alohan's eyes. I cannot retrieve them myself without raising suspicion. But you, a stranger, no one is watching closely. You might succeed, where I cannot. The risk was enormous. If she were caught, there would be no explanation, no escape. But the reward was everything they had been fighting for. "Where is the study?" Alawan asked. "East wing, 3rd floor. The servants retire after midnight. Black Mere himself will be occupied with his guests until at least 2. Beatrix pressed something into her hand, a small key. "This opens the study door. I stole it from the housekeeper months ago, hoping I might find the courage to use it myself." Alawan closed her fingers around the key, feeling its weight like a sentence. "Thank you, Miss Mallory." "Beatrix," the young woman managed a watery smile. "If we are to be fellow conspirators, we should dispense with formality." Despite everything, Alawan laughed. "Beatrix, then. And I am Eloan. Eloan Fairfax." "Eloan," Beatrix tested the name. "When this is over, when Black Mere is exposed, I hope we might be friends. I would like that very much." They parted at the terrace door, returning to the musicale as if nothing had passed between them. But Eloan's mind was already racing ahead, planning the route to the East Wing, calculating the risks, preparing for the most dangerous hours of her life. Tonight, she would either secure the evidence that would save Caspian, or she would die trying. Part 9. The Shattering. Word. Count 1,100. The clock struck 2. Eloan moved through the darkened corridors of Ravenshollow like a ghost, her slippers silent on the marble floors, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain it would wake the entire household. The East Wing was quieter than the rest of the house, the guest rooms concentrated in the west and south. She encountered no servants, no guards, only shadows that seemed to watch her with malevolent intent. The study door yielded to Beatrix's key with a soft click. Inside, moonlight spilled through tall windows, illuminating a room of masculine elegance. Dark wood, leather chairs, shelves lined with books, and there, above the fireplace, the portrait of a stern-faced man who could only be Black Mere's father. Alawan crossed to it, her hands trembling as she felt along the frame. The portrait swung open on hidden hinges, revealing the safe behind. The combination, his wife's birth date, written backward. Lady Vance had provided that information weeks ago. Now she blessed that thoroughness as her fingers found the dial. Click, click, click. The safe opened. Inside lay a stack of documents bound in leather, letters bearing seals she recognized from Thaddeus Crane's copies, ledgers filled with damning entries. The proof of everything, the key to Caspian's freedom. She gathered them quickly, tucking them into the hidden pocket Lady Vance had sewn into her cloak. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the final bundle, a collection of letters tied with black ribbon. She should leave. She should run. Every second she remained increased the danger, but something made her look at those letters, made her slip the ribbon free and unfold the topmost page. And what she read turned her blood to ice. The letter was addressed to Lord Blackmere. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and the content revealed that Blackmere's conspiracy reached further than anyone had imagined. Someone within Caspian's own family had been feeding him information for years. Lord Geoffrey Ashford, Caspian's uncle, his father's own brother. A sound from the corridor. Alawan shoved the letters into her pocket and spun toward the door, but she was too late. The handle turned, the door swung open, and Lord Aldrich Blackmere stepped into his study. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Blackmere smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Eloan had ever seen. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said pleasantly. "Or should I say, Mrs. Fairfax. Yes, I know who you are. I have known since the moment you arrived. My dear Geoffrey warned me of Lady Vance's movements weeks ago. Did you think his betrayal extended only to Caspian? I do not know what you mean. The lie tasted like ash. Of course you do. He stepped closer, and she retreated until her back pressed against the wall. You are the widow who harbored the Duke of Thornwood. I must admit, I underestimated you. A common widow, involving herself in matters far above her station. It would be admirable if it were not so foolish. The evidence is already gone. Alawen lifted her chin, refusing to show fear. Whatever you do to me, the truth will come out. Will it? Blackmere's smile widened. I think not. You will disappear tonight, tragically drowned in the ornamental lake after too much champagne. Your body will be found in the morning, and any questions will be answered by Lady Vance's convenient confession that you were mentally unstable. Lady Vance would never. Lady Vance will do exactly as I instruct. Her late husband was not quite the saint history remembers. I have letters that would destroy his memory, and her standing in one afternoon. The door opened again, and Captain Aldous Wren entered, his expression grimly satisfied. Take her, Blackmere said. Quietly. The lake should serve nicely. Strong hands seized Alawen's arms. She struggled, but Wren was too powerful, his grip like iron as he dragged her toward a servant's entrance. This was how it ended. Alone in the dark, betrayed by Caspian's own uncle, her body destined for cold water and a fabricated tragedy. Caspian would never know what happened to her. The thought was worse than the fear of death. I'm sorry, she whispered to no one, to everyone, to the man waiting in a cottage miles away. I'm so sorry. The door closed behind her, and darkness swallowed everything. Part 10. The Grand Gesture. Word count, 1013. Caspian knew something was wrong before the messenger arrived. He had felt it for hours, a crawling unease that no logic could dispel. Alawen should have sent word by now. Lady Vance had promised updates. The silence was deafening. When the knock finally came at midnight, he threw open the door to find Thaddeus Crane, rain-soaked and wild-eyed. They have her, Crane gasped. Blackmere, he knew everything. Time froze. How? I don't know. Lady Vance's message arrived an hour ago. Her informants within Raven's Hollow saw Elowen taken from Blackmere's study. They mean to kill her tonight. Make it look like an accident. Caspian was already moving, grabbing his coat, the pistol he had kept hidden since his arrival. Where? Raven's Hollow, the ornamental lake on the eastern grounds. Crane caught his arm. Your Grace, you cannot go alone. It is suicide. I do not care. Caspian pulled free, his voice raw with desperation. She is there because of me. I will not let her die for my failures. Then let me help. Crane straightened. I have a cart outside, and I know Raven's Hollow's grounds from my youth. There are paths the guards do not watch. They rode through the darkness, the cart rattling over muddy roads, Caspian's heart pounding with every passing minute. When they finally reached the estate, abandoning the cart in a copse of trees, Caspian could see torchlight moving near the lake. They were not too late. They could not be too late. He moved through the shadows like the hunted man he had been, using every skill he had learned in weeks of running. Crane followed silently, guiding him along overgrown paths and through gaps in hedges. The lake came into view, a black mirror reflecting stars. And there, at the water's edge, Captain Wren held Elowen by the throat. She was alive, struggling, fighting with everything she had, even as he forced her toward the water. Stop! Caspian's voice rang across the grounds, and he stepped from the shadows with his pistol raised. Wren froze. Then he laughed. The Duke of Thornwood himself! How convenient! Now I can kill you both and tell Lord Blackmere his problems are solved. Release her. Or what? You will shoot me? Wren's grip tightened on Alowan's throat. "By the time your bullet reaches me, she will be dead. Is that a trade you are willing to make?" Caspian's hand trembled. He could not miss. He could not hesitate. But Wren was right. The distance was wrong. The angle was impossible. "Caspian." Alowan's voice was barely a whisper, strangled by Wren's grip. "The documents. My pocket. Get them out. Let me go. Save the evidence. I'm not leaving you. You have to." Tears streamed down her face. "This is bigger than us. If Blackmere wins, more people die." "I do not care about more people," his voice cracked. "I care about you." Movement in the darkness. Crane, circling behind Wren, a heavy branch in his hands. Alowan saw it too. Her eyes flickered, then returned to Caspian, holding his gaze with desperate intensity. "I love you," she said clearly. "I should have told you before. I was afraid. But I am not afraid anymore." Wren's attention shifted, just for a moment, toward the emotional declaration. It was enough. Crane struck. The branch connected with Wren's skull with a sickening crack. His grip on Alowan loosened, and she tore free, stumbling forward into Caspian's arms as Wren crumpled to the ground. Caspian held her so tightly he feared he might break her, but she clung to him with equal desperation, both of them shaking, both of them weeping, both of them alive. "I have you," he gasped. "I have you. You are safe." "The documents." She pulled back, her hands fumbling at her cloak. "Caspian, I found everything. Proof of the conspiracy. And something else. Your uncle, Lord Geoffrey Ashford. He has been betraying you to Blackmere for years." The words landed like a blow. His uncle, his father's own brother. "Later." He cupped her face in his hands. "Right now, I need you to know something." "What?" "I love you too. I have loved you since you stitched my wounds and demanded conditions. I have loved you since you made me remember what it felt like to be human. And I will spend the rest of my life proving it, if you will let me." Despite everything, despite the unconscious captain at their feet, and the danger still lurking in the great house above, Alowan smiled. "I will let you," she whispered. He kissed her then, fierce and tender and full of promise. And somewhere in the darkness, the first light of dawn began to break. Part 11. The Confrontation of Love. Word. Count. 1,100. The days that followed were chaos. Thaddeus Crane spirited them to a safe house in London, a modest townhouse belonging to a sympathetic baron who owed the Ashford family a debt stretching back 3 generations. There, surrounded by allies emerging from the shadows, Alowan and Caspian began the work of dismantling Blackmere's empire. The documents were everything Beatrix had promised, and more. Letters in Blackmere's own hand, payment records tracing back nearly a decade, names of foreign agents, British collaborators, men who had died because secrets had been sold. And the confirmation of the traitor within, Lord Geoffrey Ashford, Caspian's uncle, his father's own brother. "He was jealous of your father," Lady Vance explained quietly. "Always second in line, always overshadowed. When Blackmere approached him 5 years ago, offering money and influence in exchange for information, he agreed without hesitation." Caspian sat in silence, the letter that proved his uncle's betrayal crumpling in his grip. Alowan reached for him, covering his hand with hers. "This is not your fault. He sat at our table. He mourned at my father's funeral. He embraced me and offered condolences while knowing—" His voice broke. "While knowing Blackmere might kill me at any moment. And now he will face justice." Alowan's voice hardened. "Along with Blackmere and Wren and everyone else who participated in this conspiracy." Lady Vance cleared her throat. "If you two are quite finished being romantic, we have a conspiracy to expose." The Baroness, who had become their reluctant host, arranged an audience with the new Home Secretary, a man named Lord Cedric Pemberton, who had been appointed after his predecessor's suspicious death 6 months prior. He had reportedly despised Blackmere for years, but lacked the evidence to move against him. Now he had evidence in abundance. "This is extraordinary," Pemberton said, paging through the documents. "Blackmere has made fools of us all. The crown itself has been compromised." "What happens now?" Caspian asked. "Now, we act. Quickly, before Blackmere realizes how much you have recovered." Pemberton looked up. "There will be arrests tonight. Blackmere, your uncle. Captain Wren, if he has recovered from Mr. Crane's rather effective intervention. By morning, the conspiracy will be shattered." "And the Duke's name?" Lady Vance pressed. "Will be publicly withdrawn. The Crown will issue a formal apology." Pemberton smiled grimly. "Your estates will be restored, Your Grace. Your reputation will be rehabilitated, and Blackmere will hang for treason." It was everything they had fought for. And yet, as they left the Home Secretary's office, Caspian felt strangely hollow. "What troubles you?" Alawan asked, as their carriage rolled through London's darkening streets. "I have spent so long running, hiding, fighting for survival, and now it is ending. Now I must think about what comes next." "And what does come next?" He turned to her, taking her hands in his. "That depends on you." "On me?" "Alawan, I told you at the lake that I would spend my life proving my love if you would let me. I meant it. But I know that what I am asking is enormous. I am a duke. My world is politics, and society, and expectations you never asked to bear. You are asking me to marry you." "Yes." The word came out barely above a whisper. "I am asking you to marry me, to be my duchess, to stand beside me as we rebuild everything Blackmere destroyed, and perhaps, someday, fill those empty halls with children." Alawan was silent for a long moment. Then she laughed. "You impossible man." She cupped his face in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I fell asleep in a cold cottage, dreaming of survival. I opened my door to a stranger and found purpose. I lied to soldiers and stole documents and nearly drowned in a lord's ornamental lake. All for you. Did you truly think I would refuse you now? Is that a yes? That is a yes, you fool. 1,000 times yes." He kissed her as the carriage rolled through London, as the sun set on the old world and rose on the new, as everything they had suffered transformed into everything they had won. Part 12. The Public Claiming, plus Epilogue. Word. Count. 1,400. The trial of Lord Aldrich Blackmere was the sensation of the season. All of London crowded the galleries, craning for glimpses of the man who had betrayed his country for a decade, whose conspiracy had reached into the highest levels of government, whose downfall had been orchestrated by a duke and a widow working from a cottage in the countryside. The evidence was irrefutable. Witness after witness testified to Blackmere's crimes, from servants who had carried his secret messages to foreign agents who had been captured and turned. Beatrix Mallory spoke with quiet courage, her testimony damning and precise, her engagement to Blackmere's son dissolved by her father the moment the truth emerged. Lord Geoffrey Ashford, confronted with proof of his own betrayal, broke down in the witness box and confessed everything, weeping as he described the jealousy that had driven him to sell out his own nephew. And when the verdict came, guilty on all counts, the courtroom erupted in chaos. Alawan watched from the gallery, her hand clasped in Caspian's, as guards led Blackmere away to await his execution. The man who had nearly destroyed them both, who had killed and corrupted and betrayed, reduced now to a prisoner, shuffling toward his end. "It is over," she whispered. "No, Caspian lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. It is beginning. The wedding of Caspian Ashford, Duke of Thornwood, to Mrs. Elowen Fairfax was not the grandest event of the season. It was not held in a cathedral or attended by hundreds of society's elite. It was held in the small church at Aldbury Cross, where Elowen's parents had married and where Edmund was buried. The guests were few but meaningful. Lady Vance, resplendent in silver. Thaddeus Crane, ink-stained and beaming. Beatrix Mallory, finally free to choose her own future. Elowen wore a gown of ivory silk, simple and elegant, with thornwood blossoms woven into her hair, a private joke, a shared memory, a symbol of the impossible season that had brought them together. When she walked down the aisle toward Caspian, she did not think of all the times she had feared this moment would never come. She did not think of the danger, the conspiracies, the nights she had lain awake wondering if she would survive to see morning. She thought only of his eyes, gray as winter storms, warm as summer rain, watching her with an expression that made her feel like the most precious thing in the world. "You came," he said as she reached him. "Did you doubt it?" Every moment until now. The vicar cleared his throat, and they both laughed, turning to face him as the ceremony began. The vows were traditional, spoken with voices that trembled only slightly. When Caspian slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, Elowen felt the weight of everything it represented. Not just marriage, but partnership. Not just love, but survival. They had fought for this, bled for this, nearly died for this. And now it was theirs. "I pronounce you man and wife," the vicar declared. "You may kiss the bride." Caspian cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she had not realized she was shedding. "Ready?" he asked. "For what?" "For everything." He kissed her, and the small church erupted in applause, and Elowen Ashford, Duchess of Thornwood, discovered that sometimes the most impossible stories had the happiest endings. Epilogue. 1 year later, the cottage at Briarwick had not changed. Elowen stood in the doorway, breathing in the familiar scent of wood smoke and wildflowers, remembering the night that had altered her life forever. The furniture was the same. The books still lined their shelves. Even the chair where Caspian had bled and told her his secrets remained by the fire. But everything else was different. "You are certain you want to keep it?" Caspian asked, joining her in the doorway, his arm sliding around her waist, his hand coming to rest on the gentle curve of her belly, where their first child grew. "It is where we began." She leaned into him. "I want our children to know this place, to understand that their parents' love was not born in ballrooms or grand estates, but here, in a modest cottage, during a storm. Our children." His voice softened with wonder. Inside the cottage, a fire crackled in the hearth. On the mantel sat a framed letter, yellowed with age, but carefully preserved. It was the last letter Caspian's father had written before his death, discovered among his papers after Blackmere's fall. In it, he spoke of love and courage, of choosing happiness over duty, of his hope that his son would one day find someone worth fighting for, someone worth everything. "Have I told you today that I love you?" Caspian asked. "Twice. But I will accept a third. I love you, Elowen Ashford. I love your courage and your stubbornness and your absolute refusal to be awed by my title. I love that you negotiated terms with me before you would even agree to help. I love that you walked into a traitor's home and stole the evidence that saved us both." She rose on her toes to kiss him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I love you too, Caspian. I love that you stumbled to my door, half dead, and still managed to be imperious about it. I love that you read philosophy to me by firelight, and burn porridge, and argue with your godmother. I love that you chose me when you could have chosen safety. Safety, he murmured against her lips, is overrated. They stood together in the doorway of Briarwick Cottage as the sun set over the moors, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. In the distance, they could see the church spire, the village, the world that had tried so hard to tear them apart and failed. 1 year ago, a duke had whispered, "Hide me," at her door. Now he was her husband, her partner, her future. And every evening, no matter where they were, no matter what duties called them, they returned to this truth. That love, real love, was worth any risk. "Shall we go inside?" Elowen asked. "The evening grows cold." In a moment, Caspian pulled her closer, resting his chin atop her head. "I want to remember this, the light, the silence, the peace. I want to remember what it feels like to have everything I ever wanted." She smiled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "We have all the time in the world," she whispered. And they did.